Hello everyone, today we're getting into a new lesson on congruent polygons. So first, for some vocabulary, geometric figures are congruent if they have the same size and shape. So they're going to be basically the same shape, the same size and same shape. And then we have something called corresponding angles/sides. And so in this, is in the same position on a different figure of the same shape. So when we have two congruent figures, we say the corresponding angles or sides are basically in that same position on both. And we'll see some examples of that here in a second. And then something that we're going to use a lot later on in this unit is that corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, CPCTC. So looking at an example of a diagram, here we have two triangles that are congruent, and we have this congruency statement, which reading that just says that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. And from this congruency statement or from the figure, we can actually see which angles are congruent to each other and which sides are congruent to each other from these congruent figures. And that's because they are the corresponding angles and the corresponding sides. So looking at the picture, I can see the corresponding angles, and that's from these arc marks. So for instance, I know that angle A is congruent to angle D because they both only have that one arc mark. So I'm going to have angle A is congruent to angle D. Angle B, I see, is congruent to angle E because they both have three arc marks. And then angle C is congruent to angle F, and that is marked in the diagram as they both have two arc marks. So those are just marking which ones are congruent. And then we see the corresponding sides as well. And so I see that AB is congruent to DE, and I see that because they both have two tick marks. I see that BC is congruent to EF because they both have one tick mark. And then AC is congruent to DF, and I see that because they both have three tick marks. And so these are the corresponding angles and corresponding sides of these congruent triangles. And something special about my congruency statement here is, and then we see this in this tip, when you're writing that statement, you're also stating which parts are congruent. And so you can do that by listing the angles that are congruent. So like I see A and angle D, they're congruent to each other. They're also the very first letter that we say. Angle B is congruent to angle E, and they're both the second letter in our congruency statement. And same with C and F. And we also see that with our sides as well. And so I see that A, B, and DE are congruent to each other. They're also the first two letters in our congruency statement. We see that with B, C, and EF. They're congruent to each other, and they're also both the second two letters in our congruency statement. And then AC and DF, we see they're both the first and last letter. And so that kind of guides us in how we write our congruency statement that we're going to do for this first set of examples. And then when we're doing problems, you can also use this to know which angles are congruent to each other and which sides are congruent to each other. So let's go ahead and do an example. So here I'm going to write a congruency statement for the triangle. Identify all pairs of congruent corresponding parts. So I'm going to start with just going ahead and stating which angles are congruent. I'm going to start with angle J right here, just to go in alphabetical order. It doesn't matter which one you start with. So I see that angle J is congruent to, I see angle J has 2 arc marks, so the angle over here that has 2 is angle T. Now let's go to angle K. Angle K, I see, has 3 arc marks, and the angle over here that has that is angle S. And then angle L has 1 arc mark, and angle R does as well. Okay, now let's go to the sides that are congruent. So first I see JK. That one has 1 tick mark, and the other one that has 1 tick mark is TS. I see that KL has 2 tick marks, and so that means that the side that's congruent to KL is going to be SR. And then JL has 3 tick marks, and I see that TR has 3 tick marks. And I remember when you're naming these segments, you can switch the order. So this could have been KJ, this could have been RS. They all mean the same thing. And I'm going to go ahead and write my congruency statement. And so I know the order of my letters matter. It doesn't matter first which one you just start with. I'm going to just do it in alphabetical order, so JKL. But now I need to make sure that my second triangle matches up. So I need to see, what is angle J congruent to? Angle J is congruent to angle T. So that means that this first letter is T. Angle K is congruent to angle S. So that means this needs to be S. Then angle L is congruent to angle R. So this needs to be angle R. Go ahead and pause the video. I want you to try and do the same thing with this second problem. When you think you have it, go ahead and press play. Okay, so the answer you should have gotten here is that triangle MNP is congruent to triangle YXZ.